Group. I'll let folks in as they trickle into the waiting room. Well, welcome everyone to Thriving Together NCW's second learning session of the year. My name is Veronica Farias. I've been working at Thriving Together since the summer of 2023. And I've been on a mission to develop and grow this regional network of partners that are coming together, thinking upstream, and exploring the vital conditions framework for health and well-being. Joining me today is Monty and Stacy from Community Initiatives. And Sarah, why don't we go ahead and start sharing the slide deck so that I can start orienting myself. All right. So through these efforts, we launched this virtual learning series. If you missed our first session, I invite you to visit and check out our YouTube channel. It is now available on there. And stay tuned for upcoming sessions and topics as we wrap up today's learning session. You can go ahead and jump to the next slide. All right, so before we jump into today's content and topics, I'd like to just go over today's goals for today's learning session, and that is to share an understanding of what it means to multi-solve, particularly around our food system. We hope to gain some insight on the power of procurement from our food, or some from national voices within the food system, and highlight local and partners across the region that are advancing work right here in North Central Washington. So we hope that you all can also offer some of your contributions, expertise, learned experience on this topic and contribute to some of these efforts as well. We can jump to the next slide. All right, so before we jump into today's agenda, I'd like for us to quickly take a moment to connect via chat. It's a larger group, so doing popcorning, it will take quite some time. So let's just connect via chat. I have a prompt here for us ready to go. But essentially, if you can just share your name, your organization, and then 2 words that describe your spring season. And maybe we can start to recognize some names, some organizations, and just do a warm little welcome. And as we get folks entering their names and organizations and 2 words, this is a quick look at our agenda and our time together. So we'll have Monty lead us with a definition on multi-solving and offer some of his expertise in this work. We will also take a look at nutritious foods and what that looks like within the vital conditions framework, as it nests pretty well within the basic needs for health and safety. And then we'll take a moment to hear from national community voices from Bella and Maria. And then we will wrap things up with a breakout session for an opportunity for you all to contribute to some of these efforts and some of the conversations and some juicy questions that we'd like for you all to provide some input on. And then we will just wrap some today's learning session with a quick sneak peek on what's ahead. All right, well, it feels so good. There's a great turnout. So thank you all for joining, and a huge shout out to Joshua Porter, who is visiting us from Okanagan County, and he has a large group of students and folks at the library. Thank you. All right, Monty, I'll let you take it away from here, and we'll jump right into multi-solving.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, Veronica, for your leadership and kicking us off. And yeah, I'll just do some light framing and yeah, then hand it over to our friends who are going to help offer some, I think, important context for a generative conversation here. So multi-solving is it's a word that I think we're hearing more and more of, and I love the word because it almost defines itself, right? It's pretty evident. The multi-solving is solving more than one problems at once, and it really allows us to advance multiple solutions. Probably heard the old adage, a good solution solves multiple problems. So that's kind of the sentiment behind or notion behind multi-solving. And it's really different than, as the slide suggests, the business of usual, where a lot of times we are kind of take on problems in a more siloed way, whether that is housing or mental health. Too often we see these as single disconnected problems or opportunities. And so the opportunity with multi-solving is for people from different viewpoints, whether those are disciplines or perspectives in their communities or different sectors, to be able to kind of strengthen how they solve problems together. And in the process, when we bring diverse perspectives together, multi-solving our different strengths, our perspectives allows us to actually have multiple benefits. And I think this next slide, uh, Veronica, or maybe it's Sarah who's advancing these, is just kind of one of the obvious examples that, as communities are doing things like becoming more bikeable and more walkable and adding more trails, not only does that accrue benefit to more physical activity, it reduces road congestion and emissions, so it has an impact on the environment. And it also has the possibility of building our relationships, and maybe even increasing, people coming across local businesses. So this is one simple example, and we're going to hear a lot around how food is just ripe for multi-solving. If we start to think about our food systems as a way of solving multiple problems, but also achieving multiple outcomes, I think we're going to hear some interesting insights from both Bella and Maria here in just a moment. And next slide. As many of you know, that this particular Thriving Together North Central Washington is organized its network of networks around these vital conditions, these conditions that all people, no matter where they are, no matter their age and life course, what we all need on a regular basis in order to thrive. And and again, at the center of these vital conditions is belonging and civic muscle. So it's built on our community. It's built on our ability to work together. And when the vital conditions was first designed and built, it was really designed so that we would start to see the intersection of learning and transportation and housing, and this is a real values-oriented framework. So it's not just housing, but it's humane housing and meaningful work and wealth. So one of those basic needs for health and safety, as you'll see on the next slide, was one of the key elements of that is nutritious food and really this idea of healthy food systems. And so when we kind of were first rounding out the vital conditions several years ago, that's been built on work for decades. Actually, the leader of Bella's organization, who's going to speak momentarily, Paul Daniels, actually wrote the chapter on food and kind of how the food world really could be a multi-solver and how it intersects with housing and these other vital conditions. And so that was a really important part of the movement. And so, yeah, I would love to kind of on that note, what we're going to hear from is a little bit of Bella Steinhauer, who is with the Center for Good Food Purchasing, to kind of offer some ideas from kind of a little bit of a global perspective. And then many of you know Maria Hines, who is an amazing asset and leader within your own community, is going to share a little bit. And I had the honor of working with Maria actually on a multi-solving workshop when we were together at the summit. So we're going to hear a little bit more on that front around what multi-solving is, what's happening in our food world, and engage in a little bit of some dialogue around what you're hearing and where you see opportunities. So with that, Bella, thank you for joining us and welcome to this network, and would love to kind of hear some of your ideas and maybe framing a little bit of how you're seeing the food systems world.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Monty. And it's so great to be with everyone today. Lovely time. Great time to share all of this. Cool. Well, I'll get into a little intro on the Center for Good Food Purchasing. So at the center, we focus on using the power of procurement to create a transparent, equitable food system that prioritizes the health and well-being of people, animals, and the environment. So we do this through the nationally networked adoption of the Good Food Purchasing Program, where we work with large-scale institutions to evaluate how their food purchases align with good food values and provide data-informed technical assistance to shift purchasing practices to drive movement building and policy change. And why focus on food? Well, because food impacts all of us in many different ways. And that's why food has been identified by many field-leading researchers across various multidisciplinary sectors as one of the most high impact ways to address not only human health, but also environmental sustainability. We can go to the next slide. So thinking about how food is a multi-solver, let's look at some of the high-level issues that arise from our current industrialized food system. So notably, about a third of global greenhouse gas emissions stem from our food system, and nearly $2 trillion in US healthcare costs are spent every year on treating preventable metabolic diseases. In addition, 70% of all antibiotics used in the US are used on farm animals to compensate for the inhumane living environments in factory farms. Beyond this, many of the lowest paying jobs are in the food system, with many food workers living in extreme poverty. And overall, for every $2 in health and sustainability costs, for every $1 spent on food purchasing in the US. So the impacts of this are felt inequitably, with the greatest impacts on food chain workers, small and mid-sized family farms, communities of color, and other historically underinvested communities. So thinking about food as a multi-solver, we really think about it at the center and want to expand that to like larger thinking of food system change as moving towards a values-based food system. And just to give a brief overview, when we're talking about the food system, we're talking about all of the stages where food is exchanged, from where and how it is farmed or raised, how it is processed, stored, and transferred, how it is marketed, consumed, and disposed of. So there are a number of stakeholders involved in each stage, including the farmers, ranchers, the farm animals, food chain workers who pick, process, cook, and transport food, waste management workers, and of course, consumers just like us. And when we talk about the food system and all of those involved, for our conversation today, I want us to keep in the back of our minds a focus on power and decision-making. So this graphic on the left really simplifies the process, but we know that huge corporations own mass portions of our food system and influence how it is produced, how workers are treated, who is denied access to food, what's put in our food, land use, and so many more things. So when we're really thinking about food systems change today, it's crucial to reframe these decisions to be community-based. So at the center, we're thinking about this in terms of the good food purchasing values. So what does a good food system look like? So at the center, our framework for food systems transformation is guided by these central values that we view equally and holistically, because the problems in our food system are deeply interconnected and mutually reinforcing. And I'll note that even though these values guide our organization through the lens of institutional procurement, we view them as larger values that should be embedded in our food system as we imagine what a thriving, equitable, sustainable local food system can and should look like. So I'll quickly define each of these categories, starting out with our three central pillars of equity, accountability, and transparency. So equity and accountability and transparency means centering food system transformation on investment in and justice for Black, Indigenous, Latino, Asian, and Pacific Islander communities. It also means encouraging supply chain transparency to hold corporations accountable, and building authentic engagement to ensure that impacted communities are engaged in decision-making. And just running through the definition of each of the 5 value categories, local and community-based economies means seeking to support local, diverse, family, and cooperatively owned food businesses to improve economic resiliency and community prosperity. Environmental sustainability means sourcing from producers using sustainable practices and reducing carbon impacts of food to ensure that food production protects our ecosystems for current and future generations. Valued workforce means ensuring that food suppliers respect workers' rights to bargain collectively for better wages and working conditions so that food workers can live and work with dignity. Animal welfare means purchasing from producers that provide higher welfare conditions for farm animals and reducing animal product intake. And finally, community health and nutrition means prioritizing culturally relevant, high quality, and nutritious food that promotes health equity and access. And just to map the good food values to the vital conditions, you can see how food can solve across a majority of the conditions, from health and safety to meaningful work and wealth, a thriving natural world, and the central pillar of belonging and civic muscle. So when we think of food as a multi-solver, the alignment between these two frameworks really just says it all. But instead of me just telling you how food is a multi-solver, let's jump into an example from the Good Food Purchasing Program that's just south of many of you in Ellensburg, Washington. So this last year, we worked with Ellensburg School District, who, before even being evaluated under the Good Food Purchasing Program, has taken a ton of initiative to swap everyday items they use on their menu for local replacements. And in doing so, they began buying beef and pork from Greenbow Farm, which is a local family-run farm, which, while this seemingly seems like a simple choice, has ripple effects across the value categories. So Greenbow, first of all, is a regenerative farm. So that means that their techniques are improving the soil health, promoting local biodiversity, and reducing and likely absorbing carbon impacts in the region. They also employ humane animal treatment, as cows, pigs, and chickens are all pasture raised, which not only results in happier, healthier animals, but promotes nutrient density, and the food produced is environmentally sustainable. And then because the animals are treated well and processed on a small scale, there are also no ultra-processed additives or antibiotic use on the animals, which is more nutritious and prevents the building of antibiotic resistance in consumers. The farm also offers fair wages and working conditions so that the people caring for the people that are caring for the animals and processing the meat. And finally, because the farm is local, it means that instead of the public dollars from the school being spent on mass corporations that control our food system, they are instead circling back to support the local economy and sustaining small-scale family farming in the region. So while this example demonstrates the impact of institutional procurement decisions, it also exemplifies the impact that we all can have as consumers. Think about your local farmers market, and just having intentionality going into the food that we purchase and consume. But that can't really happen without policymakers enabling us to do that. So this really highlights the importance of policy and advocacy to support farmers, food workers, districts like Ellensburg, and consumers like all of us to be able to produce and access good, values-aligned food. So this often entails building and maintaining the critical infrastructure needed to strengthen regional, rural, and urban linkages, which ensures that economic and social health and well-being for farmers and their communities, while at the same time supporting workers along the supply chain and increasing access in city communities to good food coming from these regional small-scale farms and processors. And what I mean by critical infrastructure includes the various initiatives that localities across the country and the world are catalyzing through food strategy plans, which I know Maria will get into a little bit more as well. But in my local region here in Austin, Texas, I like to highlight our recently approved food strategy plan because I think it really highlights some ambitious possibilities for how we can create a good food system, which just makes me excited to talk about. So as you can see, they have a goal related to institutional procurement work, which is what we do at the center, but they also include a law on environmental justice goals related to land access, preservation, and sustainability. They have one on food insecurity, disaster relief, education and nutrition, and worker livelihoods. So basically a ton of good food multi-solving. But yeah, that's all I have for you all. I know that was a lot of information, so I'm happy to share any resources after the webinar. But yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, Bella. And yeah, just jumping in, and I have the privilege of serving on the board for the Center for Good Food Purchasing, and I'll just note that coming up in October, there is this movement towards good food systems, and the value of good food systems is growing in interest. Major foundations like Rockefeller and Kellogg and others are invested in it, as well as some corporations that are reimagining what a good food system looks like. So there'll be coalitions statewide and local and regional from all over the country that are starting to do this work. And as Bella alluded to, there's large food systems, which are often the biggest purchasers of food, as well as hospital systems, and including other government facilities, other anchor institutions that are really aligning themselves around common definitions and common metrics. And in a very polarized environment, per our last gathering, food is one of the places where there seems like there's some real opportunities to kind of multi-solve across some of the ideological divides. And so thank you for your leadership, Bella. And I think it always takes local leaders that are, willing to kind of go against the common grain. And Maria, that brings us to you and the incredible work that you and your team have been up to here in this region. So I'll turn it to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Monty. Appreciate it. Bella, thank you so much for the national scope. Really, really appreciate it. And also thank you for sharing your food action plan that you have completed in Texas. Congratulations. I look forward to reading that. So good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Hines from Blue Sky Mines nonprofit. I am living here living and working on the land of the Methow people. And I just wanted to start out with a land acknowledgement. And I think it's very suiting for North Central Washington. Okay, so this is acknowledgements to the Colville Reservation, 12 tribes, which is Okanagan County's neighbor up here in our area. And with a desire to build deep, long-term relationships of mutual trust and respect, we humbly acknowledge the unfathomable atrocities that have occurred to the peoples and ancestral lands of the 12 tribes, which include Moses Columbia, San Poyo, Nispilam, Methow, Entiat, Colville, Arrow Lakes, Wenatchee, Chief Joseph Band of Nez Perce, Pelos, Okanagan, and Chelan. May we give thanks and honor the elders of past, present, and future generations who steward these lands and waters which nourish the people. We're committed to listening, continuously learning, and supporting a local food system that culturally reflects the values, the wisdom, and priorities of the indigenous peoples in this region. Thank you. Thank you for that. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Blue Sky Mine's work, which would be fair. We've only been around for a couple of years now. But the mission is in support of a local, sustainable, thriving food system for the Okanagan region and Caldwell Reservation, and it is moving through north central Washington and extending its way through Washington State as well. So I'm trying to keep pace, and it's hard to keep pace because we have such a wonderful opportunity in front of us, and how food can be a multi-solver to transform communities. You know, I was thinking about this a little bit this morning, and how multi-solver, you really could change that word out to multi-healer. So how can food be a multi-healer to transform communities? And I thought about it in several ways, and that word also functions because that's what's underneath the solving is the healing. And you know, I also want to recognize that you know, all of us here are healers, and we get into this work because we want to be in service to our communities, but we're also the ones that are in need of healing. So the healer and the one who needs to be healed lives within all of us. So there is no separation of who's being healed and who the healers are, because it's just all of us. And through that interconnection, Bella had mentioned that our food system is interconnected, and she's absolutely right. It was a beautiful way to phrase it. You know, I put together a little wheel here that really expresses that, with, you know, local community food system at the center of the table, and then all of the ways that it connects. So it connects us to social justice. It connects us to the environment, you know, where the food is grown. It connects to social justice as far as creating access for all for food, and our, you know, indigenous food sovereignty. It connects to the environment and how we're tending to the land and how we're tending to the animals, you know, when we're growing the food, for the food to be medicine. And then it also connects us to transportation and distribution, which a lot of us here in North Central Washington know a lot about. We're a very, very rural region, and access to food through distribution can be hard on a large scale. And then access to food through transportation can be really difficult on an individual level if you have transportation or if you don't have transportation. And then the mental and physical health is fully connected to our food. Food can be poisonous to our system, or food can be very healing, and it can be medicinal for our system. And then civic muscle policy. You know, Bella was touching on the national scale, a lot of the things that we have going on and who controls our food system. And we have the ability to step into our own community power and reclaim that back. We have lots of opportunities there. And then the education. Having the education on a lot of this is really important. The understanding of how food can be medicine and how it can be toxic, and, you know, what are the issues that we need to address in order to heal the food system, and how do we grow it? How do we create food sovereignty for ourselves? So a lot of education is really beneficial and powerful when we talk about food as a multi-healer. And then work and jobs, you know, as Bella touched on, there's a very large percent of our workforce that is working in food, and they're very often not being paid fair wages or even a living wage. You know, that includes our farmers. That includes the people who are growing the food for us and working very hard to put the food on the table that we had this morning and every day. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the interconnectedness there. Great. And then so to break it down into small systematic steps, and doing it together and really trying our best to honor the process. These are the steps that we've taken here in our region. It's starting out with the Food Council And that food council has helped engage and build trust with leaders in the community that are doing anything that touches the food system. And then once we had gathered a few times, then we started talking about a food system assessment. Like, what is it that we need to address? What are our priorities? So identifying our needs through a food system assessment. And then to stay grounded in the community, making sure that we're constantly gathering and listening and learning. And we can do a lot of that through surveys, through community, participatory meetings, celebrations, any way that we can stay in touch and be in community with the folks that we're trying to serve, because they have all the solutions. They have all the ideas. They know what they need. And then to co-create a better food future through a food action plan, just like the one that Bella had presented that Texas has done. A lot of counties we have a few counties in Washington State that have finished up food action plans. So this is something that we're currently working on with the Okanagan Region Food Council. That's the name of the food council. Okanagan Region Food Council, and it includes Okanagan County and Caldwell Reservation. And we have a lot of neighbors that are coming to the meetings because we really have collectively learned how to hold space well in this area. And it's starting to spread through Stevens County and Chelan Douglas and Ferry County. So it's been wonderful to see lots of folks come in, as well as WSDA, academia, attending the meetings to learn, to watch us learn and help us learn. And then the transformation, the transformation happens at the very beginning, which is gathering, but then, the full transformation comes through the execution of the food action plan. So we're not in that part of the journey yet, but I just wanted to show a little bit of a roadmap of where we're going. Next slide, please. So this is a little timeline that really proves that we are better together. And food council collaborations, the impacts that it can have on a community. And so our little local example here shows a little bit about what we've been up to over the past few years. So forming the food council, and then food council members going from 22 folks to 155 folks. So those are folks within the region, but it's also a lot of our allies from, WSDA, and our allies from Washington State Department of Commerce and academia and all over the place. And then let's see here. Yeah, the completion of the food system assessment last year, and then the food action plan began at the end of last year. And then a community survey, which is getting ready to come to a close, that is informing the food action plan. That'll be a main driver, and the objectives that get formed for the food action plan is based off of what the community, what they say the needs are. And then from the food council, because we've spent time gathering together, building trust, deepening relationships, there's been this beautiful bloom of partnerships and collaborations that have come from it. So the Inshalom Red Garlic Revitalization Coalition is one of those beautiful things that has transpired through the Food Council. And it's a collaboration between the Caldwell Reservation, Washington State University Extension, Caldwell Reservation Conservation District, the Light Foundation, which is an indigenous, really incredible indigenous-led organization. They focus on native plants and pollinators and indigenous food sovereignty. And they are all enrolled members, tribal members for Caldwell Reservation, and Blue Sky Mines, and the Intertribal Agricultural Council, which Naomi comes to the Food Council meetings a lot as well. and then Conservation Northwest. So all of those folks, we just all got together and started working on this project that was actually birthed from Linda McLean from WSU Extension on Colville Reservation. And this particular garlic, this strain of garlic was found just kind of out in the wild in the town of Inchalum on Colville Reservation. So we are really focused on that as a first food project. Given that it probably doesn't have indigenous roots to the area, it was probably, cultivated in Europe and somehow found its way on the land of Inchalum that received it. It, could also be classified as a second food. And then another collaboration that's come out of the Food Council is a gleaning program for the Okanagan region. This is really exciting. We've been working on it for about 8 months now. We had about 6 months of exploratory meetings, just trying to learn what the process should look like, what's the infrastructure that we need, how do we get the volunteers together, and talking to the folks that have been doing it for a long time. Upper Valley Mend, I got to give them a shout, and Leavenworth here in North Central Washington. They've done an incredible job, and we've been learning a lot from them as we're starting our first season of this project. We haven't had our first glean yet, but cherries are first up in the queue from Smallwood Farms. So Dennis Smallwood, really appreciate Farmer Dennis for being a part of launching this project, as well as Watershine at Yonder Farms is providing a lot of seed starts and plant starts to the community in need. And this partnership is with the Okanagan County Community Action Council and a lot of really incredible volunteers that are here in this region and really care about bringing local food supply to the folks that need it the most, and Blue Sky Mines. And there will be more. The Okanagan Conservation District, I think they're going to have a hand in it as well. And then, of course, we're partnering with all of our local farmers. So it's been a beautiful, beautiful thing that's blooming right now. And then coming up very soon will be the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Collective. It may be a little early to share it, but I was really excited. I think we really have something here, and this is going to be for the Colville Reservation, so we can really focus in on Indigenous food sovereignty. So I have the honor to be able to be a part of that process, and hopefully I'll have some beautiful updates on it at another time. All right, next slide. All right, so this is as far as we've gotten for our food action plan. And all of this work is being co-created. So Blue Sky Mines is tending it, but the actual creation of it is coming from everyone. So the water, the air, the sun, the seeds, everything, just like anything else, interconnected. So it's, all the folks from the Food Council, it's our community members in the area, it's our land, it's all of us connecting to put these food action plan goals in place. So we have 5 food action plan goals that we came up with. And the step we're working on now is coming up with the objectives under each one of these 5 food action plan goals. And so this will be a long process. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have it completed by spring of next year. I don't want to rush this process. I think it deserves to go slow and to be really thoughtful about it. And to help with that going slow and being thoughtful about it, we put together a charter for the Food Council along with the decision-making matrix to make sure that we're being really thoughtful about every single objective that we put onto the food action plan. How like Did we hear it from the community members? That's something that would be on the decision-making matrix for every single objective. Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the funding? Is anyone else doing this that we could lend support to instead of trying to start on our own? It's an extensive list, and when all the materials go out for this call, if Veronica can remind me, I'll send out that Food Council charter. We're super proud of it, and we spent a lot of time putting it together because it's something this large of a scale. If we're not all grounded in the same values and we are not thinking through this properly, and we are not agreeing in the direction that we're going in, there's just going to be a lot of spurs and splinters, and then it won't actually come into existence. So the taking it slow and being methodical and all making sure that we agree on how decisions are being made is how we're going to achieve success, hopefully. And so the 5 food action plan goals: end hunger and food insecurity for all community members, build resilient agricultural and land practices for food production for generations to come, strengthen indigenous food sovereignty, grow economic prosperity for our region's agricultural and food retail businesses, and increase equitable, healthy, and culturally appropriate food access. And next slide, please. Great. And that's it. Just a deep bow of gratitude for everything y'all do for our communities here in North Central Washington. And I really appreciate being a part of this network. So thank you very much.
Awesome, Maria. Yeah, just so much in there, and how you are tending, as Stacy suggested, in the spirit of co-creation, intentional around where you want to go and how you all are doing it collectively. I love that. As we've done in, the past so far learning sessions here, wanted to give folks an opportunity to respond. What's coming up for you. Heard a lot from Bella and Maria, and so I wanted to give you a chance in some smaller groups to have a little bit of dialogue here, including our friends that are there in person with Joshua's help. So I think Sarah is going to help us just for the next 12 minutes or so, just to kind of break out into the small groups. I think the slide basically gives you the questions, but you can take this wherever you'd like to go for the next 12 minutes, starting with kind of generally what's coming up for you, as you're hearing some amazing ideas and assets to build on. The second, and I don't know if somebody can put this in the chat.
Yeah, Monty, I have breakouts ready to go if we want to share the slide deck again with the questions.
Great. Thank you.
Sounds good, and I will send everyone into their breakouts. We'll jump back into things. Sarah, do you want to share the slide deck again? And Monty, I'll let you lead from here.
Sure. Well, yeah, and thanks for kind of a quick reminder of the questions. And I don't know that we need that slide necessarily if we want to just kind of open this up for a few. And great to see so many faces still here, and just, wondering what came up for you in terms of what kind of excited you or intrigues you based on what you heard, or kind of just wherever kind of your conversation had the most heat and interest. So who would like to kick us off? What was starting to come up in some of your groups?
I can break
Get
the
us
ice.
started.
Okay.
I had a wonderful discussion with Maria in Rufus Woods. And I think that part of what kind of excites us is to see the progress being made in Okanagan County and being able to say, like, okay, like using them as an example for what is possible in our region. And so there's a lot of obstacles, I think we could say. But it's wonderful to be able to watch Maria jump over those obstacles and work together with community to really find solutions. And so I'm excited to keep watching and be inspired by her and the work that's happening in Okanagan.
Just to pile on there, I think that we've decided that if we can just clone Maria, we can get a lot of stuff done. So thanks, Maria, for all the work you've done up there. It's great.
Thank you. That'd make my life a lot easier. That'd be pretty amazing. I wanna share, that is, I'm tapping into the collective wisdom. So everyone who comes to the table and they engage and they like share their voice and they share their ideas, that's a collective wisdom that we're all tapping into. So I just want to be very clear that even though I might be a big part of tending and managing what we're doing here, I am merely a transmitter of everyone else in this area.
Thanks for kicking us off. Yeah, I think there was another voices starting to share from another group.
I can share. Hope you're okay, Nancy and Lisa, for me jumping in for our group. A couple of things we talked about. We were excited to see. It was mentioned. It was brilliant that you started off with Okanagan and the tribes together collectively to be able to try to solve this. And the idea of you started very small and it grew to a rather large group, but then even from those discussions, thinking of it systematically, you're starting to see offshoots of more focused actions of people wanting to break off according to their interests to be able to do it. But you've also been able to create this overall creating this overall plan with the collective of voices. And then I guess we dove deeper into some things that could you talk about collaboration. And one of the ideas that we talked a lot about is the idea of small food pantries or backpacks for schools, and how can churches and food banks and schools, for example, work together for some of your most needy families that are identified by the school. So there's still remains some of that confidentiality. But again, you're coming together as a community to wrap around some of the most needy in your kids. And the struggle is trying to find the balance of food that they want, which may not always be the nutritious food, and how can you start to incorporate more nutritious, shelf sustainable, easy to prepare food, and to be able to send home with kids that families can prepare, but also potentially the kids could prepare themselves. So that was Nancy or Lisa, if you want to add, feel free.
I'll just add that it would be really interesting to try a pilot project at a school where instead of getting a backpack full of canned goods and other kinds of things that are typically used now, it was fresh local food. It would be really interesting to see what that would look like.
Josh, do you want to go ahead and?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, we had several conversations like that, both Classroom in Bloom at the Met House schools and some of the gardening being done by the Bush School Mazama, where that food is going into the food bank system. It was good. I was also struck and appreciated, instead of saying clone Maria, it's to cultivate and cross-pollinate. I was very appreciative in our conversation about the Colville tending of the garlic as a second food, yes, but as a long historical piece, as was the second food of the macaw ozette potato, a similar story of a long tended garden that was only rediscovered by the whites, but continuously tended by our indigenous keepers. It also ties, of course, to the first foods that are in our rivers, not just the big fish, but the lamprey. So I appreciate the idea of cloning a motivational convener, but I'm much more interested in those little pieces from each place. What are the crops that are still being grown? You know, the varieties of apples that have been resistant to frost, and the grains that are being reestablished at commercial scale by Bluebird Grains. So I appreciate the many pieces of this, despite there's no comprehensive single answer.
Sounds like a great conversation, Joshua. Thank you for sharing. Wonder if you might just say a little bit who's in the room there with you in general.
Sure. Yeah, we could go around really quick if you'd love to hear.
Sure. I know we weren't going to do introductions, but yeah, just so great to have you all. But go for it.
Sure. Maybe just really lightning round.
I'm Cooper King. Friend of the library.
Chevelle Yackel. Michelle Schmidtke.
George Schoenfeld. Walt Havens, a gardener.
Nice.
Kathleen Havens.
Alexa Adams with the Bush School. And I'm Charlotte Park from the Bush School.
Great. Yeah, just really appreciating the intergenerational level of the group today. It's been wonderful. Thanks for the question.
Beautiful. Some cross-pollinating and some next generation or intergenerational tenders, cultivators. Yeah, what else was coming out? I'd love to hear from a couple other groups.
Yeah, I was curious for the Ellensburg School District example. It just strikes me that a lot of times people do business as usual because it's easy, because the structures have already been created around like food distribution for school districts. And so it seems like you really have to slow down and take the time to figure out how to revamp it. And Maria, this for me was like, that's why we need folks that are hosting and tending to this, because otherwise it's easy to say, I don't have time. I'm just going to do what the easiest thing is. Bella, I don't know if you have insights into how the Ellensburg School District, like what that shift meant for them in terms of time and leadership and.
Yeah, I think like what we find across our network is a lot of these really wonderful champions that exist at different institutions that take that initiative on their own. And the food service director at Ellensburg is one of those. You know, like usually when we do like a first assessment of a school district, they have never really, they want to do this work, but they don't necessarily know how, or they're tied into these contracts and all of these kind of, these contracts that kind of tie them into with like larger distributors and how they're like getting their food. But in Ellensburg, it's a farming community. There's a lot of local producers, and so it just made sense. And so I think that that's really where it came from, and making sure that they can get it written in their solicitations when they're putting out contracts and requests for proposals for how they're getting food into the school. And they're actually part of a larger program in partnership that we have with the Chef Ann Foundation as well, to begin supporting them in shifting towards more scratch cooking within the school, so that they're able to source whole ingredients from local farms as well, because that's a common issue with school districts too, is they already have a lot of labor constraints in their food service, so they often opt for heat and serve model that requires them to purchase a lot of pre-processed foods. So again, that just like goes into having champions and initiatives, but also finding levers where you can find partnership with other organizations, with local farmers that are willing to support, and finding the best way to create a solution through different forms of collaboration.
It's a great question, Caroline. I think, as you said, and I think here in Maria's comments too, is how do we slow down to reimagine? And as we start to think about multi-solving, all of those local stakeholders desire a new way of thinking about this work. There's very few that don't want to reimagine that, but are looking for pathways and maybe some capacity building and some modest resources to kind of move into some pathways that are new. What else is coming up? And Caroline, were you in, I don't remember what group you were in.
I had a lovely chat with Adeline. I don't know if Adeline, you want to share anything that surfaced for you?
I think just mainly that school district thing stuck out to me because it's interesting to see like who prioritizes what, like especially like with like it seems like it takes a lot for schools to make changes. So it was interesting to see that Ellensburg was able to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. And there's a lot of great examples, and that's where, seeing what's going on in other parts of the state and other parts of the country, as well as your own assets, is super helpful, because I think we see more and more school districts and other anchor institutions that are looking to use levers like procurement a little differently. Looking at others, Philip, any other folks, things that came out of your conversation that you'd like to give voice to?
Well, I just spoke about a local movement that's taking place here as a young lady. She works for the youth development program for the tribes. And she's starting little community gardens here and there all over the res. So I was able to connect her with one of the individuals. I can't remember his name, but I'm going to try to connect them to. Also, I gave her Maria's info as well a while back, just to be a help, but we're not really actively doing anything here per se. But I do intend to, my wife and I are going to move on to the res and build a greenhouse and hopefully get at least like some farmers market type stuff going here.
Thank you, Philip. I wanted to loop, Maria, you shared a little bit, all these different bits and pieces, and our friends at the library, there's these assets, these kind of pockets of possibility as we sometimes hear, and wondering, this vital conditions network that is kind of a fuller region, with multiple counties, wondering where you see opportunities for the vital conditions network to participate, to amplify, where you see possibilities. And that's for everybody, but just thinking, Maria, given some of your stewardship role.
Yeah, thank you, Monty. And Philip, really exciting to hear about the community gardens on the reservation. That's really, really incredible. I'd love to connect up sometime and talk about it. Yeah, I think, it could be fairly simple using the same model that we've been doing here in Okanagan County and just expanding it out. So the Okanagan Region Food Council, like, the folks that come to the table is academia. So we have folks from, Western Washington University and from UW and WSU. And then we have our local public health and our local economic organization here. And then we have farmers and ranchers, a superintendent of a school, Classroom in Bloom, food pantries, our food bank, health services. These are all the folks that are coming together from both county and tribes to talk about our food system. And so it would be a lot of those same leaders, but it would just be on the on the regional level. And I kind of want to, I want to, Nancy, I'm such a fangirl of yours, and I haven't met you yet, but so much of my research has come from IRIS for the food system assessment, and you all have a North Central Washington Food Council that has not been meeting regularly as of late, but I just feel like I would love to hear a little bit about what that journey was like, and where you would like to see it go.
Huh.
But to answer your question, Monty, I think that's it. Like, I think it's fairly simple. It's just, scaling it up. It's just like more neighbors, right? Just extending out the family, but it would be a lot of the same thought leaders, but like all of the, public health districts coming together and all of the food pantries, like in North Central, like the power in that, the amount of impact that we could make at that level, we could start talking about infrastructure at that level. It's kind of hard here in Okanagan County because we're the, second poorest county in the state, but there could be so much more leveraged if we were, all collaborating around food. Yeah. And so Nancy, what's your journey been with that collaboration of getting folks together about food? Sorry to put you on the spot.
We'll have to get together and have and have coffee or something. But I would just say that it's so exciting to hear about where you're at and what's happening. We did through Iris start this work and started building we called it a regional food coalition, and we really didn't have the capacity to do that job with other things that we were doing when I look back at it. But I also think it is helpful to start where there's really good energy for it. And there's always really been a lot of energy for local food in the Methow and in Okanagan Valley. There's so many great producers. I mean, and I think it's in part because of the isolation. You know what I mean? People were there is that sort of can-do attitude and that sort of, we got to make it happen in the Okanagan. And so I think starting like you did with Okanagan County and then with the Colville Confederated Tribes, I just think that was really smart. And so I think whatever we accomplished in the years that we worked on this, if we can, because we did a food assessment for the whole region, including Grant County, in 2009, I think it was, or 10. So I mean, it's great you're looking at that stuff because I think there's some things to build on, and so we make good use of all the information that's been gathered, but it's also great to move on, and it's a different time, a different context, and I think that COVID did a lot of damage, but it also maybe did a lot of good in terms of helping people realize how fragile our food system is. And so I think building on that while the momentum is good is wonderful. So I'm excited to learn more about your work, and we do need to get together. Yeah.
Just following the great exchange in the chat, and thanks, Nancy, just even thinking about this bridging work. I mean, one of the great things about food is that it has the possibility of building communities, I think has been explicitly stated in so many ways. Veronica noted that obviously the Community Action Agency and some of the food banks that work is as important as ever. And I think with food banks around the country, we're seeing kind of how stretched they are and the challenges of this balance with nutrition and healthy foods and trying to do our best as the numbers continue to grow. So Veronica, I don't know if we want to do a light touch on that or just acknowledge that there's some real opportunities for some collaboration. And John, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I'm curious, just because the nature of our agricultural community, we have a lot of local growers, but we're also almost like a big national grower area as well. If there's any examples on how, like in those dynamics where agriculture is such a component of both the economic and food aspects of our community, how those larger agricultural communities have been able to be brought into these conversations to really take a leadership role in shifting some of this. We were talking a little bit about just agricultural fair labor practices in our conversation. And there's so much that could be done in our community to make a shift around food, but I don't know, and Maria, I don't know if you've engaged any of those agencies in Okanagan County. How do we just start shifting the mindset of some of those individuals who have such influence over the system?
Yeah, John, that's a great question. Thanks for bringing that in, and great observation. Because they can be real allies. I think even if there could be differences in viewpoints around agricultural practices, I think that there's a big potential for a lot of the big farms in the areas to be a part of the conversation and to you know uh, like help bring them into the leadership and the support for this change, because those really big farms, there's a lot of folks that work for them, and everyone has their own individual viewpoints as well. So it's like, I know that there'd be a few folks in there that would be looking at it through the lens of sustainability for a community. And I haven't actively reached out to our larger farms. If anyone has any connections with Geber, who I don't know if they have a sustainability program, or someone who they could connect me with, please let me know, because they have been on my list, but they're so big, I find it hard to know, like, who do I go to, to like have a conversation with. It's been a little bit easier with the smaller farmers and ranchers, because they know each other out here in this area, and Farmer Cy will just say, hey Amber, you should come check this out, from Fillery Farm. And then there they are, and like, hey Claire, you should come check this out. And so then you have Farmer Claire there, and I think the word gets around a little bit more, because they rely on each other as small farms and small ranchers. And so I think it probably creates a little bit of isolation for the larger farms. So bringing them in would be really, really beautiful. It's just finding who that champion is within that large farm that would come to the table and be an ally and a leader, is a step in the journey that I look forward to taking, and hasn't happened yet. Yeah, thanks, John.
It looks like
Sorry, Monty. I just want to share, this is very exciting stuff, Maria. As I'm working to, grow and establish this regional network of partners, I'm seeing this over and over again, food security, and it is a common thread across the region. So I'm excited to hold space in Grant County to have these conversations, and invite you to share your wisdom, as well as, Chelan Douglas, OVOF Chai. They have also been doing great work in their health literacy program, and diving into food system as well. And I just absolutely like how they have incorporated the education piece to their chais symposiums, but also ensuring that the food that they're offering during those chai events is healthy, and often, inspired by a local health educator. I happen to work with her at Public Health. But yeah, I'm just excited for the momentum that we're building, and excited to see how we can scale this up at a regional level.
Thanks, Josh.
Awesome.
Josh?
Hands up there in the corner.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, anyone who wants to come to the Food Council meetings, like, come, just email me. I'll send you the link. Just come. We have one coming up next month. Currently we're meeting every season. So every spring and summer and fall and winter. So like, it's hybrid. If you come in person, I cook everyone lunch. So that's a bonus. We have an hour of networking time where everyone can just get to know each other and just hang out and chill after the meeting. But it's always hybrid, so that way folks that can't make it, we got a lot of ground to cover. So it's not always possible for us to gather in person. So when that happens, then there's still space for all of us.
Yeah, I'll definitely vouch for how fun those meetings are, for sure. And really enjoying this conversation, and a curiosity, especially going back to Bella, some of the stats you began with, especially around, what was it, 2/3 of the preventable healthcare costs related to food access and nutrition. And one thing that came up in our conversation, just a curiosity about some programs like produce prescriptions or healthcare shares. There was a moment we had a nutritionist at Mid-Valley Hospital that was interested in having students look at what kind of a model like that, but then they ended up actually moving on. So just curious if through Thriving Together or Bell or any of you are aware of any such programs in our region that are connecting healthcare system directly with providing that local nutritious food.
I'm not super familiar with any specific programs, but within the Good Food Purchasing Program, we work with school districts. We also work with a lot of hospitals, because a lot of hospitals also want to be providing nutritious food to their patients. And so they're kind of working under interesting constraints of different food requirements that they have when it comes to allergies or certain textures in food. But that's like one way that I've seen like a direct connection between like the healthcare system and our food system, as well as hospitals actually taking a look into what they're buying now, and where they're able to shift to more local items, or more sustainable items, and working that in as well with their distributors.
And Joshua, one of the things, as Bella knows, that the Center for Good Food Purchasing, which was focused more on school districts and other, primarily at one point, now Healthcare Without Harm, of course, has a lot of practices around, how to support procurement through the health system. So just recognizing how much time, it seems like there are a number of ideas around where folks might be interested in thinking about how we spread this kind of across the geographies, as Maria's invited us to think, or maybe some creative ways to pilot this with some healthy food with school districts, and how we might think about some different types of practices with farmers. So just noting that, I think with Thriving Together, and I'm going to throw this back over to you, Veronica, that maybe there are some possibilities to follow up with this and see if there's others that might be interested in kind of convening and building off some of these ideas, and see where that might go over the next few months and in time to come. So
Yes.
really exciting to hear. So Veronica, let me pass it to you.
Yeah, indeed, Monty. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining today's call. I have a quick one last slide that I wanted to share with everyone. Is just a quick peek at what's ahead for our network learning opportunities. So in July and September, we will have 2 more learning sessions. One will be focused on a tribal learning journey, and the other one will be around thriving natural world, one of the other 7 vital conditions for health and well-being. And then save the date, October 22nd will be our 2nd annual Thriving Together Summit. So stay tuned for that registration link coming your way. And with that, we wrap up our 2nd learning session. Thank you all for joining. You will get an email from me with the slide deck, recorded link, and be sure to visit us on socials and our website.
Thanks again, Bella
Have a
and
great
Maria.
Tuesday.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Everyone.